Welcome back to Amazin But True, our New York Mets podcast from the New York Post. I'm your host, Jake Brown. Joining me in just a minute will be our buddy. He covers the Mets and the prospects for SNY. He does the Mets pod with Connor Rogers. You hear them advertise their pod almost every night on SNY. That would be our buddy Joe DeMayo. Will join us in just a second. A good time to have him to talk about these prospects, to talk about Acuna, to talk about Clifford, to talk about who these guys got, Drew Gilbert, and how they are doing right now and how the Mets farm system stacks up as they have improved. And, you know, you're seeing some of these guys on the Mets farm play right now, and you're seeing Ronny Mauricio do it with success. I mean, hits in every game he's played in. He's hitting .421, is 8 for 19 since joining the Mets with 3 stolen bases. Absolutely fantastic to watch Mauricio. The Mets lose Wednesday night. They split the 2 in D.C. They won 11-5 Tuesday. Jose Quintana was great. The power bats were out. Francisco Alvarez finally ended his 76 at-bat home run drought with his 22nd homer. Pete Alonso hit number 42. Brandon Nimmo hit 2 homers. So the Mets power bats were out and about. Francisco Alvarez is the second primary catcher in MLB history with 20 homers and 50 RBIs in a season at age 21 or younger. The other, Johnny Bench in 1969. So Alvarez, I think, really needed that. Wednesday, leadoff walk will always bite you. And that bit Phil Bickford in the ass. Leadoff walk, hit by pitch, sack bunt, single, Mets lose. They had their opportunities. They couldn't get it done. And, they're not going to get it done when Trevor Gott continues to pitch. Jose Butto was tremendous. Terrific outing. 6 1/3, 6 Ks. He leaves with first and third, 1 out. God forbid the Mets have a reliever that can get out of a jam and save the starting pitcher. Trevor Gott's not the guy to put in there. I mean, he's the guy to put in never, unless it's mop-up duty. But he gives up 2 singles. Bam, tie game. A 2-0 lead evaporates. And then Bickford of the ninth blows in, and the Mets lose 3-2. I hate to look at the standings, but it would have been intriguing if they were to win that. They're 9 games under, see where they're at. Maybe they're still at 8 out. I mean, it's insane that they're still not just dead in the water. But they win that game 6.5, 7. We see, but this wild card has just been so funky. It's just so unpredictable. The Marlins have now, they look dead at a game under, have won 6 straight. And the Marlins have propelled back into the 3rd spot. The D-backs are half out. The Reds are half out. The Giants are the ones now tail spinning who have lost 6 straight. And they're at 500 and 2.5 out. So it has been a topsy-turvy ride here in the wild card race. So the Mets now stand at 64 and 75. They have 23 games remaining in this season. And to talk about the remainder of the season and the Mets prospects, let's chat with Joe DeMayo. All righty. You heard my quick little open there, but the star of the show today on Amazin But True, our Mets podcast from the New York Post, is friend of the program. You, as I said before, you hear the ads, always on SNY. You hear Gary Cohen, shout him out. So if you don't know the name, then you either had it on mute, or you take a bathroom break, or you're going to eat, or you're taking care of the kids, or every time they announce it, that part of the game, you blatantly choose not to hear his name. And that's Joe DeMayo at PSL to Flushing on Twitter, the co-host of the Mets pod on with SNY. Of course, the Post, we are collab digitally with SNY, so it is a collaboration and a buddy of mine. Joe, welcome back to the program. A good time to have you here with the prospects. Those highlights take over Mets highlights these days. Although it's been fun to watch some of these, Mets prospects like Ronnie Mauricio get his chance and shine here. You got to be loving this. I've been waiting for Ronnie since July. You fully break down prospects, so I trust you more than I trust myself. So tell me what you think about him finally being up, the timing of it, and tell me what you like about what you're seeing so far from Ronnie.
Yeah, I mean, I'll tell you, selling at the trade deadline was fantastic for the Joe business, if we're going to be entirely honest here. But Ronnie Mauricio probably should have been up earlier than he was. I do think the Mets did maybe subliminally keep an eye on a date around August 20th or later, because at that point he'd maintained rookie eligibility for next year. So if Ronnie Mauricio ends up being everything that he potentially could be, and say he's a rookie of the year in 2024, the Mets would actually get an extra first round pick for carrying him on the opening day roster. So I wonder if to some degree that was in their mind. I do think they truly wanted him to work on his defense. They kind of played him in left a little bit. They played him obviously at second, which is what we've primarily seen here in the major leagues, but it's exciting for him to be here. I remember the Mets signing Ronnie Mauricio at 16 years old, and I've been following him ever since. They signed him as a 6'2", 160-pound tall, rail thin kid, and he's obviously grown to his body, become a very strong kid, strong wrists. The exit velocities are going to jump off the page. So far, so great with him. So obviously a really exciting time for prospects now with the big league team. So despite a tough year where the Mets aren't really going anywhere, it's cool that on most days we're going to see some combination of Brett Beatty, Mark Vientos, Ronny Mauricio, and Francisco Alvarez in the same lineup. And then we could follow the kids down on the farm as the minor league season wraps up.
Yeah, let's finish off with the major league guys. Then I want to get through the guys that they got, and one of them for Max Scherzer, which, I am liking that Max Scherzer trade more and more by the day. I will say, as he gets pounded by Justin Verlander, the Astros, 7 runs. I mean, my God, they might have just sold at the perfect time. I'm still not in love with Verlander trade, but I get it. And you wanted to clear up the locker room. You wanted to shake things up. Clear that money off the books. I thought he would have been still an ace in this rotation along with Senga, but I get it completely. And the Scherzer trade looks great. Francisco Alvarez, 76 at bat drought without hitting a home run, Joe. Finally hits a dinger on Tuesday night. I know that had to have felt good for him. You saw the stuff with Steve Gelbs, with him, working on his English is awesome and him answering in English. Were you worried about the drought? Was he just gassed? I mean, he's the catcher next season. We know that. But are there any concerns that you have that the long season's a bit much for him, or was that just a rough patch for him?
I do think it was like a rookie wall of sorts you hear about in football and other sports. It exists in baseball, especially at the catcher position. So he was really learning on the fly at the big league level, catching. It was nearly every day. So when they first brought him up, obviously they kind of treated him as Tomas Nido's backup for a little bit, which was weird. But once they kind of got over that and he started hitting, he was playing nearly every single day. So I think he just long season hit a wall, and I think he'll be better for it next year. So Francisco Alvarez's bat is something I have no qualms about. And obviously this year has been a huge growth for him defensively. He's clearly a leader out there. He's recognizing the pitch clock. He's very aware of everything. He's athletic behind the plate. He's definitely been better defensively than I think anyone could have reasonably guessed. And he's going to be a 25, 30 home run, middle of the order kind of bat. And he's going to get close to that number this year. And I think he's going to be even better next year. So I feel obviously great about Alvarez and not too concerned about obviously a tough stretch.
One guy who we're concerned about because he was in a dry spell for a long time was Brett Beatty. Beatty went down to the minors, got his mojo back a little bit. He always seems to do well down there. He just crushes the ball when he's at Syracuse, comes here. In the beginning of the season, he was fantastic for a month or so. And then, once Escobar was traded, we saw him slowly going a tailspin. Are you worried about Beatty? Because in my mind, Joe, I think the Mets are going to have to potentially sign a veteran third baseman, unless they want to put Mauricio there with him, unless they want to play McNeil over at third, unless they want to shift things around. I feel like you might have to get another third baseman, because I don't know if I've seen enough from Brett Beatty, at least at the plate, and defensively, obviously, he struggled as well.
Yeah, I honestly think his confidence was really messed up. And I think a lot of it stems from that pop fly that took like the slice, like my golf swing off to the right, and he dropped it. So I think that he took that to the plate, which is a lesson he could learn from the guy standing next to him, Francisco Lindor. When he was struggling offensively, he didn't take it into the field. Obviously, he's been an elite glove at short all season. I think Brett took some of his defense to the plate and went down, reset, looked obviously great in AAA, like you said, Jake. He hits AAA pitching. He's going to hit AAA pitching, and that's what it is. And he looks a little better, a little more comfortable, I'd say, since he came back up. His biggest problem is he needs to stop hitting the ball on the ground, because he'll hit the ball very hard. He needs to more consistently elevated line drives in the air. And he's a big, strong kid. So if he hits the ball in the air, some of them are going to carry out. I don't think you should expect a veteran third baseman, to be honest with you. I think they're already sort of setting expectations for 2024 of may not have the same expectations as this year, which, if we're being honest, what were the Mets' expectations this spring? 97 wins, 100 wins again. So even if they build a roster that we can preseason say, they might win 87 games, that is less than this year, but it's still a competitive team. And Billy Epler was on MLB Network Radio, and when he was doing the whole diatribe about why he's talking about the projections, he kind of just like subtly threw in there's going to be a lot more young players in the lineups. So I don't think third base is something they're considering for veterans. Obviously, we'll see how the offseason goes. I certainly wouldn't expect a big one like Matt Chapman or something like that. But I think it's Beatty, maybe Mauricio, because I do think the Mets intend to get him some looks at third as well. But I would certainly wager money on Brett Beatty or Ronnie Mauricio being the opening day third baseman. And the Mets have not given up on Brett Beatty yet.
I always say second base is the perfect position for a guy who doesn't really have a position. And I always look at Daniel Murphy. I thought Daniel Murphy was very good at second base for a guy who was inept in the outfield. At second, he was good. At first, he was decent. So I think Ronnie Mauricio could fit in just fine at second. If you keep McNeil could play anywhere. He could play left. He could play right. Where I think Mauricio, if he keeps, proving himself these next couple of weeks, this is why we wish, of course, he got more of a sample size. But like you said, like Epler said, if they're going to play young guys, I think Ronnie Mauricio has a chance to be the everyday second baseman in 2024.
I do too. And, maybe they will test some of his positional versatility, because he did play some left in AAA. And he had been outspoken himself that if he were to not play shortstop, he'd prefer it be third base, because left side the infield, easier, the angles the balls are coming in at, etc. But I think Mauricio has the opportunity here over the next 3 weeks to solidify himself as an everyday player in 2024. If that's maybe kind of shifting him and McNeil around on certain days. But I do think he's looked a little better at second base than I thought he would. Because if we're being honest, second basemen typically are not built like Ronnie Mauricio. I don't think there's many 6'4", 220-pound second baseman out there. But all in all, his actions look fine. And kind of like you said, I think it's a position where you can kind of take a decent athlete, put him there, and they'll be fine.
I look at if not first, second base would be the position I would play. Yeah. Maybe not in 23, but maybe back in 1999 when I was 8 years old, in my only year in Little League in third grade, maybe that was my position. Second, not a ton of movement, light throws to first base, not too difficult. But the last of the baby Mets is a head scratcher, because early on Buck didn't really play him, and I think that messed with his mojo. And he never really got to get his feet wet here. He didn't know when he would be in the lineup. He didn't know if Vogelbach was playing over him, which he always was. But Mark Vientos, like, at this point, to me, he's looking like a trade chip and not a guy that's going to be part of the 2024 Mets. Barring a monster few weeks here, I just don't see a role for him on this team right now, because you're going to have to get some bats. You can't just go with all the kids in 2024 and sell that to this fan base. Yeah, I know it'd be great for you. It'd be great for business, but I don't think it'd be great for winning if you put a kid at every single position. So what do you think about Mark Vientos? What is his future?
I will say it is very difficult for these kids who, if you just think about these high level prospects, which Vientos was at one time a highly regarded prospect, like he was the star in high school. He was the second round pick. He was one of the best players on the diamond all the time. It is hard to adjust to, I don't know when my name's in the lineup next. It's hard to do that. And lately, he's been playing a little more frequently. And you're starting to see a little better results. I think Mark Vientos can hit. I do agree in the sense that positionally, kind of a DH that you can jam at third base if you have to. You could jam at first base if you have to. But he's basically like a DH kind of guy. And honestly, in a lot of ways, very reminiscent of JD Davis, who was kind of like, you could put him at third base sometimes if you had to. High exit velocities. He's going to hit the ball hard, hits the ball on the ground too much. So that's another thing with him. He does the same kind of thing where he hits the ball on the ground too much. But strong kid, powerful kid. I certainly wouldn't be like writing his Mets obituary yet that he is like going to get traded. But if there was interest in Mark Vientos, I'm sure he might be among the people they'd listen on. And ultimately, he does have minor league options left still. So say the Mets were to sign, I don't know, name a DH that's not Shohei Ohtani, I guess, other than him. But like say they went and signed a JD Martinez or someone of that ilk to get like a true DH in the lineup, which they've lacked since the DH came to the National League. You could always have Vientos in AAA as depth as well. So kind of a riding the fence answer, I guess, a little bit, but I still think he could hit, and it's just a matter of is the fit here or not, and that's something that they will have to decide over the coming months.
Hey, I'm a big JD Martinez fan. I would gladly sign him to a one-year deal. He is a nice power bat to have. Not a prospect, but Joe, can we stop with Daniel Vogelbach? I mean, the games don't matter. Why is he in the lineup? Like, do you understand it? Like, you look at the exit velocity and stuff more than me. I get it, his exit velocity is decent, whatever. He's not going to be back on the team. If he is, Mets fans will revolt. And yes, I understand the last 2 months we fell in love with him. I think we fell in love with the story. Fat guy hits a ball far. We love it. It's New York. You relate. We eat a lot. Chicken parm, blah, blah, blah. But enough Vogelbach. We want to see the kids. I know you're semi still in the race here at 8 out. 14-year-old Jake would be watching the standings every day and be like, you're saying there's a chance? You're saying, but like, they're really not in it. So can we see Vientos everyday DH? Can we see Ronnie? Can we see the baby Mets? Do you understand this Vogelbach fascination?
Not really. I don't. Once they sold at the trade deadline, to me, that's you move to the kids. And Francisco Alvarez is a little bit different because of his position. I think they genuinely want to handle him a little bit with kids' gloves here over the next month. So you'll see Omar Narvaez play 50% of the games, give or take, which is fine as they kind of prepare Alvarez for 2024. But Daniel Vogelbach should be a bat off the bench who will once in a while play. You need to evaluate these kids. That's the biggest thing. If they're going to talk about playing the youth in 2024, which will make some people happy, some people mad, whatever the case may be, but you need to give these guys as many at bats as possible so you can properly evaluate. The most important scouting is self-scouting. So you have to know what you have in-house before you're worried about bringing in people from outside the house. And if you don't give them ample opportunities to play, which it seems like they're on track to do so with Mauricio and Beatty, Vientos it feels like it's kind of hit and miss, but I would play Mark Vientos basically every day at DH. I would play Ronnie Mauricio basically every day at second, let him try left and third, and Brett Beatty I'd play every day at third that he's in the lineup. And Vogelbach should be, to me, hanging out on the bench and cheering on Pete Alonso.
Listen, yeah, exactly. He should be cheering on his boy. That's why he's playing. That's it. That's the reason. And it's enough is enough with this guy. Mike, you saw Tuesday night what the lineup did without him, and then someone tweeted me the stat. They're like 8 games over when he's in the lineup in like the 72 games he started or whatever. That's not enough of a sample size. It's not an entire season to tell me the Mets are better with Vogelbach in the middle of that order. You saw that, without that being clogged up in the middle, you saw them score left and right 11 runs without him. So I'd love to see that every single freaking day. All right, I had to get that off my chest, Joe. I feel a little bit better now. That was a little therapy Vogelbach session right there. All right, now let's get to the real deal, the kids. Now, Max Scherzer, 3.63 ERA, 3-2, 7 games. It feels like it's a lot worse since that as he gave up 7 runs for the Rangers. That trade's looking like a home run. Luis Angel Acuna, I feel like we're seeing highlights every day that he stole 7 bags last night or something. Stats aren't jumping out in you, but 2 homers, 10 RBIs, 13 steals, 258, 30 games, 343 OBP for Double-A Binghamton. Now we're not, there's no shot they're going to call him up here for even a week. I don't think it'd be fun. I think it'd be a cool storyline that final home weekend to see him, but what do you think of Acuna, and is there a chance he is part of 2024, or is he a 2025 guy?
I think he could be a part of 24, and I don't think it's an opening day 24 thing. I would suspect he would start the year in AAA, and as even like if you're in AAA and you perform, and there's a spot that opens up, you can slide in. He's already on the 40-man roster, which is a big thing. They won't have to add him. He was already added by the Rangers back to protect them from the Rule 5 draft. I think it was last year they added him. But look, when they traded Max Scherzer, what I remember leading up into the deadline, reading, Mike Puma's articles at the Post and reading all over the place, it seemed like they can't get anything for Max Scherzer. Forget about it. Like they're not even, they'll get a fringe prospect if they eat half of his money. Well, they ate a bunch of money, and they got, for me, the number one prospect in the system. Most sites also have him at the top of the Mets list. Not a big power guy. He's a smaller guy. He's certainly not his brother. I joked with someone. They're like, "Is he anything like Ronald?" I was like, "If he's half of Ronald Acuna, he'll be an 8-time All-Star." Like that. That's how good his brother is. But he is largely a contact and speed-based guy. His on-base skills have taken a big step forward. Last year, there was a lot of swing and miss and chase. He's shrunk his chase rate down. Fast, smart base runner too, because he's not like, when he's one day a major leaguer, you're not going to go on his baseball savant page and see he's in like the 98th percentile in sprint speed. He's good speed, but he's a smart base runner that knows when to run, times his stolen bases really well. I want to see him get to that gap to gap power, which is what he had with Texas. Obviously, we're at 29 or 30 games I think he's played with Double-A Binghamton. He hit 2 home runs on what's today, Wednesday? No, today's Thursday. On Wednesday night, he hit 2 home runs. Those were his only home runs since joining the Mets system, and they were 2 of his 4 extra base hits. So it's been a lot of singles and stealing bases. I want to see him get into those doubles, triples, and use his legs, because he has a chance to be a top of the order, spark plug, annoying player to face, which there's going to be other prospects. I'm sure we talk about that. We'll talk about the athleticism that they have. So they're changing their mold to become much more of an athletic organization. And Acuna defensively plays shortstop mostly. He's played some second base since joining Binghamton, and he's dabbled in center field with the Rangers organization. Yet to do so with the Mets, but he's going to be an up the middle player, good athlete, has a chance to be an above average regular, which is something that I think a lot of people scoff at, because it's basically like, when it comes to prospects, it's either they're a superstar or they're a bust to like the general public. And I think he has a chance to be an above average regular that can play on a contending team.
So he'd probably be second here, I guess, if they have Beatty / Mauricio third, and then Lindor short. I mean, they're going to have some questions to answer. And then the center, you'd expect him to stay. Do they end up trading McNeil this offseason? That's going to be intriguing to watch, like to open up a spot for one of these kids. But yeah, you have to love that trade at this point. I mean, he's had a great year, and looking forward to maybe seeing him next year. The other trade was the guy that beat Scherzer last night. That was a weird, as a Mets fan. I know Kodai Senga posted that on his Instagram story. He posted the pitching matchup, which was just a subtle, funny little post there from our new ace, Senga, as Jose Quintana has held down the fort as well. So I think you're pretty excited as a Mets fan with those 2 guys going over, and then you got to sign or trade for 3 more. The other trade was Justin Verlander. Give us a breakdown here. Drew Gilbert looks great so far in Binghamton. 300, 4 homers, 16 RBIs. He's got 16 and 54 on the season. Almost a 400 OBP so far with Binghamton in the month he's been here. What do you think of Drew Gilbert? And then what do you think of Ryan Clifford, who has struggled a little bit, but has hit for power this year in Brooklyn? What do you think of those 2?
Drew Gilbert he's ranked number 3 in the system for me. He was the Astros first round pick last year. And the Mets were quite interested in Drew Gilbert in last year's draft. Just the Mets picked a little higher than he was projected to go. So they took Kevin Parada and Jet Williams with those first round picks. And obviously Gilbert fell, and they were able to get their hands on him. He was the star of Tennessee baseball, which was the number 1 team in the country. He is the type of player that I think New York fans are going to absolutely fall in love with. He is the definition of, like, I hate to use cliches, but he, in a way, it's hard to not. Like, he is a gamer type of player. Everything he does is 1,000 miles an hour. He swings hard. They need to get him a better fitting helmet in AA. I don't know what size helmet he's wearing, but he swings so hard sometimes the helmet just like flies halfway off his head. He is hustling gap to gap. He's a great leader in the outfield. And I even heard Reed Brignac, the manager, say he was here for 3 days and he was already positioning the right fielders and the left fielders. So he's a commander, leader in the outfield. Everyone says he plays with his hair on fire. He hits a ground ball at second base. He's busting down the line. The power's not huge, but he maximizes what his body can handle, because he's a smaller guy as well. He's only 5'9", but he's got strong forearms. So he has, maybe it's 15 home run power at the next level, but it's doubles. He's a good base runner. He could play any of the 3 outfield spots, center, left. He has the arm for right if he needs to play right field. And he's the type of guy that when he comes off the field, it's not a good day at the park for him if his jersey's not dirty. So, like, that's the type of player that ultimately what it comes down to is if you perform. But if you perform and have that type of gamer mentality, that's the type of thing that I think fans, especially in New York, especially Mets fans, attract themselves to. I know there's been some comparisons to like a Lenny Dykstra type of player like that. I avoid comps, but just to give something. Really, really excited about Drew Gilbert. I liked him a lot in the draft, and I think the Mets are excited to have him. And he'll be another guy that I think joins Acuna in AAA to start next year, and will be working his way to a call to the big league sometime in 2024, where maybe that starts the Brandon Nimmo to corner outfield thing. And I think that inevitably was going to happen. They signed Nimmo to the 7-8 year deal, whatever it was, and he certainly wasn't going to be a center fielder for that whole thing. So I would suspect there's a chance that Drew Gilbert can be the guy that moves Nimmo off of center field. And then Ryan Clifford, he was a highly regarded prospect last year, ranked inside the top 75 or so 80 plus prospects in the class, but he had a hard commitment to Vanderbilt, which is, there's a few schools in college baseball that it's very difficult to pull kids away from their commitments unless they're a high first round pick. It's Vanderbilt, it's Florida, it's UCLA, schools like that, that if those guys aren't first round picks, they're not often going pro. And Clifford fell. And once he was beyond the 3rd round, it was basically just like, all right, Ryan Clifford's going to Vanderbilt, and we'll see what he's about in 3 years when he could re-enter the draft. Then the Astros surprisingly popped him in the 11th round and went over slot, offered him basically mid-second round money, and he took it, signed. It's a clean left-handed stroke, and it's probably the best raw power in the Mets system at this point. Like, this is potential for 25, 30 home run type of power. It's very legitimate. Defensively, he's not a great athlete. He's an okay athlete. Like, he's playing first base. He's playing a little corner outfield. But his swing and miss has been too much in the 30 games, so he needs to trim that down. But as a kid that was drafted just out of high school last year, he's already performing. I think he's second amongst minor league players that are under 20 years old in home runs in the minor leagues. So legitimate power. We'll see where he plays. Who knows? Maybe it's a DH type of thing down the road. But to get those 2 quality players for a current 40 going on 41-year-old Justin Verlander, I think was good value, though I certainly understand the other side of the coin. Tough to deal Verlander and lose that ace. But you did hear Steve Cohen say in his locker room thing, like, do you just want to run back the same team a year older? So I think if there was a time to make a big change, it was this deadline. And Steve Cohen showed one thing is he's not half in, half out. He's either all in or all out. And that was apparent at the deadline.
Listen, as long as they put together a team that can make the playoffs next year, I don't want to see a team that finishes in 4th or last place again. You can't
Yep.
sell that to the fan base in back-to-back years with the richest owner in the sport. You mentioned high school kids, and two of them, they basically got out of high school for David Robertson. Now, this trade, I didn't love the timing of it, doing it during a rain delay of a game 5 days before the deadline. And the naysayers will say the deal might have not been available 4 days later. And the naysayers will say that David Robertson's been terrible for the Marlins, which is true. Numbers wise, it has worked out. But tell me what, I don't know a lot about them. We may never see them. They could be trade bait, but tell me what you know about Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez.
So Marco Vargas, big time helium prospect for the Marlins, which a helium prospect means guy that's kind of blowing up. He put up huge numbers in the Dominican Summer League last year, and often those are taken with a grain of salt. But he came stateside and he basically kept doing what he was doing. And one thing that the Mets had, which was advantageous for them in a way, is he played in the Florida Complex League, which is basically rookie ball. The Mets are they play like 7 or 8 teams and they just rotate playing each other over and over. And you go to their backfield, they come to St. Lucie's backfield. So the Mets had a lot of eyes on Marco Vargas and Ronald Hernandez, of course, because they both were on that team, where typically, like, say they wanted to go scout Luis Angel Acuna, or they wanted to go scout Drew Gilbert, they had to have their area guy go, and they had one eye on him, basically like one person's set of eyes. Whereas if they're in the St. Lucie backfield, you have scouts there, you have player development people there, you have analytics people there, you have everything. So you could get eyes on everything that's going on. And Marco Vargas is someone that made the top 10 of my list right out of the gate. Even after the trades for guys like Clifford and Gilbert and Acuna, who all slot obviously right in there. Vargas is great bat the ball skills, elite plate discipline is what I was told is something to keep an eye on. Defensively, he's probably best at second base. He's played some short, he's played some third, but it's not a huge guy, so I don't think it's big power, but it's bat the ball skills, it's high on base ability, and a solid athlete. Whereas Ronald Hernandez, behind the plate catcher, a true leader behind the plate is what I was told. He is already bilingual, like he can fully do Spanish and English, which is obviously a big advantage, and he's been able to do that at a very young age. Another on base guy that is something the Mets obviously prioritize is plate discipline. And he's got a little more power. He's a little stronger than Vargas is. And like you said, these are guys that may or may not ever make it. And the timing of the trade, in my opinion, I don't have any sourced information on this, but in my opinion, I think the Marlins were trying to move aggressively on a reliever, and the Mets very much wanted to add Marco Vargas to the system. It was basically like, if you want this deal, you have to take it now, or we're moving on to a different reliever option. So I think they were like, are we selling or are we buying? We need to decide at some point. You can't wait until literally the day of and work a Max Scherzer trade, work a Justin Verlander trade, and a David Roberts. All these things at once, it's very difficult to handle it all. So someone had to go first. And my personal opinion, I feel like the Marlins, in a way, forced the Mets' hand where it's like, if you want this deal, you have to take it. Otherwise, we're going to move on. That's what I think probably happened.
All right, well, Marco Vargas better be damn good then. But now I'm over it. At the time,
Yeah.
I was not happy with it. I was there.
Yeah.
I'm leaving the stadium, looking at my phone after sitting there for 90 minutes in a rain delay, and see the trade. I'm like, oh, and it was that what was it, the Joker when here it goes.
Yeah.
That's how I felt in that moment. The last trade, before we wrap up here, might have been the best because it was just like a random steal. It was Dominic Leone for Jeremiah Jackson. Jeremiah Jackson's 21 homers this year, AA 6 so far in 29 games in AA Binghamton. What do you know about him? And does he have can he be on this team next year or 2025?
He'll be Rule 5 draft eligible, so they'll have to decide if they want to add him to the 40-man roster or leave him exposed to that. But I believe he was also Rule 5 eligible last year and wasn't taken, so they may or may not add him. But this is actually power over contact. He's not a big power bat, but he's not really going to be a huge average guy. It's okay on base, but he can legitimately hit the ball pretty hard. He has defensive versatility. I think he has, the upside to be a utility type of player. But like you said, I mean, with all due respect to Dominic Leone, the Mets got a actual player that has some level of something for Dominic Leone, and not just like half a year of Dominic Leone. It ended up being like a week and a half of Dominic Leone because the Angels waived him right away. So obviously a trade that took me by surprise. When it came out that Mets are trading Dominic Leone to the Angels, I go, they'll get cash considerations and they'll clear a 40-man roster spot to call up somebody or something like that. And when it was actually a person that can kind of play, I was definitely surprised. And what the Mets are trying to do here is, I'm talking about all these prospects. I'm giving you kind of in a way, a rosy outlook, like what they potentially could be. But the harsh reality of this world that I've been in for 20 years, almost at this point, is a lot of them just aren't going to become what they could. Some won't make the majors. Some will make the majors and not be good. So the whole idea is a certain percent of prospects are going to work out. If you get a lot of them, then that percent of a bigger number is a higher, obviously, success rate. Whereas if you have a shallow system, which the Mets have had for years and years now, is, great guys at the top, like Alvarez, Beatty, Mauricio, top of the list, really high quality. And then it would just like completely fall off a cliff. Now you want to be deeper and deeper, because if you're 15 deep, 12 deep, 13 deep, whatever, you can afford some of those misses. Whereas if you're 2 or 3 deep, you need every single one of them to be a legitimate hit, because as much money as Steve Cohen has, he ain't going to field a $20 million player at every position. You need some of these guys, for better or worse, no other way for me to put it. You need some of these guys that are making $700,000 and playing every day, or starting every 5th day, or pitching out of the bullpen. It can't be just high priced everywhere. And obviously, too, who doesn't want to root for a homegrown kid? I think when all things being equal, you're going to be more into, like, people are more into Pete Alonso than they are Francisco Lindor. As great as Lindor has been, Lindor was still kind of an import from Cleveland, and Alonso was Met drafted, Met developed, and obviously we can have a Pete Alonso discussion anytime you want.
I'll answer right now. Should the Mets consider trading Pete Alonso? Go.
No. What he has half of the franchise 40 home run seasons. He is arguably the best power hitter in baseball. He loves New York. He's embraced New York. He's never shied away from the media. Like, how hard it is to play in the city. And Pete Alonso from jump has handled New York perfectly fine. And I understand that, sure, there's going to be some analytics about aging and blah, blah. And I'm an analytics guy. Pete Alonso is going to hit home runs for a while. He's a guy that 20 needs to be up in the rafters. He's a guy that needs to hold every Mets offensive record. He's a guy that could genuinely go to Cooperstown. So you cannot trade Pete Alonso for prospects. Does that mean you're going to strike an extension this offseason? Maybe, maybe not. I think they should try. I don't know what the expectations are on either side. I know there's been some reports that like $200 million would work. And if that's the case, go for it. But if he wants Aaron Judge money, that will not work, because you're still compared to the position you play. But ultimately, if Brandon Nimmo can go to free agency and come back, if Aaron Judge can go to free agency and come back, Pete Alonso can go to free agency and come back. So I would love to see it wrapped up this offseason and not have to worry about it and not have to stress next offseason. But I think if he does find his way to free agency, if I'm the Mets, I would say, go see what you could get. And then whatever he gets, unless somebody's willing to completely tarnish the first base market, which is like $26 million a year right now at the top with Freddie Freeman. So unless they want to go $40 million a year on Pete Alonso, then you say, okay, good luck. But come back. Steve Cohen has the money to outbid whoever he wants to for any person. So Pete Alonso needs to be a Met for life. Like I said, ideally this offseason, but I don't want to hear about trading him. I have nothing to do with it. And I love prospects, and they would get an absolute haul for him in prospects. There's no denying that, because he's awesome and still in his prime. So keep Alonso, even if 2024 is the bridge year or whatever you want to call it, and 2025 and 26 is where they're really going for it. Pete Alonso will be like 31 years old. So keep Pete Alonso, forget the trade stuff, whatever. They listened. It's fine. If someone calls, you answer the phone, but that's it.
Mr. Prospect says no prospects for Pete Alonso. He is Joe DeMayo at PSL to Flushing on Twitter, the co-host of the Mets Pod with SNY, wherever you get podcasts, and on the SNY YouTube page. Joe, great to catch up with you, and hopefully I'll see you at hockey jersey night. You planning to go on any more games this year?
I think we might be doing one more show from Citi Field, I think, next week. What day is hockey jersey night?
That's Tuesday the 12th, the day after Jets Bills Monday Night Football.
All right. And 2 days after Cowboys Giants Sunday night. So yes. But I don't know if we're doing the show Tuesday, but if we are, then I will be there for hockey jersey night. But I think we do have one more time at Citi Field, but I will not be going anymore as a fan. I'll say that.
All righty, there it is. Joe DeMayo, we appreciate you coming on. We'll talk to you soon. Thanks.
You got it, dude.
All righty, great stuff there from Joe DeMayo, who knows everything prospects. That says goodnight to episode 178 of Amazin But True, Mets podcast from the New York Post. Thanks to Andrew Hartz for helping me out and producing the show. Subscribe to Amazin But True on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, Amazon, wherever you get podcasts. Subscribe to the New York Post Sports YouTube page to watch all episodes. Give us a thumbs up below. Comment below. What should the Mets do in the offseason? Who do you want? What do you want? Let us know in the comments. Follow me on Twitter at Jake Brown Radio. Follow the show at Amazin But True. The Mets will go to Minnesota this weekend. Friday, 8 o'clock. Saturday, 2 o'clock. Sunday, 2 o'clock. We'll be back with a new episode on Monday before the 4-game set with the Diamondbacks. Could be intriguing if the Mets won the series and then find a way to sweep the Diamondbacks. Where would they stand? I'm just trying to leave a little bit of hope, because that after that weekend, that'll determine officially dead in the water or hanging on by a thread. And then the Reds will come to town to Citi Field. Thanks, everybody, for listening to Amazin But True. We'll talk to you Monday, and tune into Gangs All Here as well. A new episode is preview the season. Check that out with me and Brian Costello if you're a Jets fan listening. We'll talk to you Monday, everybody. Let's go, Mets. Peace.